he registered as a Republican.
Let's
move on. Jeff, we'll begin with you on this question. An effort is underway to raise the federal minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, a move that reportedly would cost U.S. private businesses some $15 billion in additional salary expenses. Candidates, where do you stand on the push for a higher minimum wage and its impact on the U.S. economy? Jeff?
In principle, I do not oppose raising the minimum wage. Unfortunately, like the bill that went through Sacramento that I voted against to raise minimum wage in the current federal debate, it's also tied to an automatic increase on minimum wage tied to the cost of living thereafter. And that is a lazy way, irresponsible way for Congress and in the state legislature and the other act to give up the responsibility of having to determine what the proper minimum wage is and what the impact on businesses and jobs are. One of the challenges is that we're treating different people the same. Some kids coming out of college would love to have a minimum wage job at the current minimum wage set, yet because of the failed policies out of Sacramento and Washington, D.C., we have no growth in our economy. We're not creating the kind of jobs that allow so many other people who are trying to raise a family and are stuck on minimum wage to make ends meet. And so I would suggest that these need to be looked at not only with what's the right minimum wage, but how can we offer earned income tax credits for those people who are trying to raise a family and couple those together so we're not treating somebody trying to raise a family on minimum wage the same we are a college kid or a high school kid just trying to find a job. But more important than anything, as Washington, D.C. and Sacramento need to focus on growth. We need to focus on creating jobs and moving the economy forward so that there's opportunities to move up the rung and not be stuck at the minimum wage, which is exactly what the White House has done and Sacramento has done over the last number of years.
Thank you, Jim. Doug Quebec.
The minimum wage is a family wage, and that's why it has to be supported. And Jeff is exactly right on matters of growth. But then you have to think about what the means of matter. How do you get that growth to occur? How do you get America manufacturing products again? How do you get America opening new markets again? You don't get it by allowing people to basically spend all of the resources of the United States speculating on whether or not the stock is going to go up or down, and manipulating the regulatory process to make a profit, allocating something based on derivative options and various financing devices that are very familiar to investment advisors and hedge funds, but don't produce a single job, don't open a single new market, and don't in fact supply the fuel that we need to have the economy run. You know, I loved Ronald Reagan, as you know by now. But this notion of trickle down never made sense to me. Who wants to be sustained with a trickle? Oh wait, the trickle's coming. The trickle is not enough to expand the economy, to expand for new jobs, to cover the minimum wage. Yes, the minimum wage is a necessity, but it's a necessity in the context where businesses are given the opportunity and the monies are available to expand. We can do it. We know how to do it. We did it after the Great Depression, and we can do it now.
Thank you, Doug.
Yes. My first job was $1.40 an hour. I think I'm aging myself with that one. My first job was helping my father as a janitor, and my specialty was cleaning ashtrays. Could you imagine ashtrays in offices today? That's what I did with my dad. My second job was working at McDonald's. And I had many other minimum wage jobs during that time as a young person. Now, those jobs were an introduction to work. Those jobs were never meant to be a sustainable form of dependence, of maintaining your family. What did I learn when I was a kid during those jobs? I knew one thing. I didn't want to be at McDonald's the rest of my life. I didn't want to smell like a quarter pounder every day when I went home. What it did to me, it motivated me to the next step. That's what America is about. We are training people to think that they need a minimum wage of $10 or $15 and they're going to sustain a family of 4. That's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. We do that, we're going to hurt the economy. We're going to hurt young people even further. I don't believe in that. I believe in hard work and pushing forward towards success. I believe, I'm losing my thought now. Thank you.
We believe you're done. Thank you. I'm sorry. Anybody have any additional comments on the minimum wage before we move ahead? Kyle?
The red from the off.
If I may, just briefly, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So these debates over increasing the minimum wage are very important because when you do so, you will eliminate opportunities. And I've talked to the people here in this community. You go down to Cronies in Newbury Park and you talk to them, and they're not. That business is not operating on a large margin of profit. And when you raise the minimum wage, you're going to bump up all of their employees at the entry level, and that's going to put them at the level. That's going to put them at the level of their management. So the management would have to be bumped up, and they're not sure that they can continue to keep the doors open in Newbury Park as a result of what the state legislature has done. So when we do these things, whether it's in Sacramento or Washington D.C., we need to be very cautious and understand that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
On the subject of money in politics, candidates, do you agree with a recent Supreme Court decision removing certain caps on individual campaign donations? And what is your position on accepting money from individuals or PACs outside of your district? Doug, start please.
Well, I've been motivated by this issue from the beginning because I still believe in the old movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, right? The average citizen can do it. Who is that average citizen? He's the person who works in the factories, works in the shops, right? Plows the fields. He doesn't get a lot of headlines. He doesn't drive around in a limousine with a driver. His meals aren't catered at the 5-star restaurants. He's looking for a bargain at the Motel 6 where they're keeping the light on. The fact of the matter is that we are putting public office for sale to the highest bidder. You know, when Franklin and his friends left Independence Hall after they drafted the Constitution on September 17th, 1787, a woman came up to Benjamin Franklin and said, "Dr. Franklin, what have you given us?" And he looked at her and said, "Madam, a republic if you can keep it. A republic if you can keep it. But we only keep it by keeping people like you and me inspired to care about the decisions that are being made publicly. And if people get the idea that it's only the province of the rich who are listened to, they're not going to register, they're not going to come out to vote, they're not going to preserve that splendid republic that we were given."
Thank you.
I concur with the ambassador on that one. I've never run for office, as most of you already know. And when I started this 6 months ago, I knew things were bad coming in. And what I've learned has been very interesting. It's much worse than what we know. You know, and I've told you, my background is undercover narcotics. I was actually an undercover officer that penetrated organizations and groups. And some of these groups and individuals on face value seemed like decent people. Once you penetrated them, you knew they were really bad guys. Part of that process was profiling them, getting inside. When I was in DC about a month and a half ago, I actually called my campaign manager and told her, "You know what? I think I'm going to wrap this up and not go forward. I did this 25 years ago, dealing with some really slimy people. And I don't think I want to do that again." But then I woke up that morning, the next day, and I thought, no, I reminded myself why I jumped into this. so I can fight that system. And here's the system. You know, the party of the people, so-called the people, the Democrats, you have Julia Brownlee here with 118 endorsements from politicians and special interest groups. Now, if you don't think that's a problem, it's a problem. I was told you're not a viable candidate unless you can raise $500,000 in the next couple of months. Oh, okay. But I'm going to stay here. I'm going to fight to the very end, no matter what. Thank you. Thank you.
I had the opportunity to teach this here at Cal Lutheran University in California Public Policy. We talked a little bit about the original case, Buckley v. Gorell, that came in 1976, when the U.S. Supreme Court decided that money equals speech, political speech, and the litany of cases that have come subsequent to that, McConnell and Citizens United, the most recent decisions. And there's 50 years now of U.S. Supreme Court decisions that say speech is equal to political money, and that they're the same. The problem is our jurisprudence is inextricably intertwined with this concept, and until we can figure out a way to pull ourselves away from it, we're going to have these kind of cases and these kind of holdings with the Supreme Court. And there's a long, distinguished history of kind of having those two things together. The challenge is, how do you continue to cap the donations that people can give to candidates, but also make it an even playing field for those wealthy people who also, under Buckley v. Vallejo, it was decided that wealthy people cannot be capped in anything that they spend. So an independently wealthy candidate could come in and write themselves a check for $6 million on the very first day, and yet a middle-class naval officer like myself would have to raise it $500, $100, $25 at a time to try to catch up with that person who wrote themselves that $6 million check. So the problem is, though, that the current set of policies has created an opportunity for those who support the status quo in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. to fight to support that status quo in their gaming system, whether that's big labor, big special interests, big corporations, or big government that are part of the spending lobby. We need to push back. We need a middle-class champion that's going to push back on this notion that money and speech are the same, and that those people that are out there gaming the system as a result. Thank you.
Now let's move to the next question. John?
So technically, Jeff, you can continue. Are you done?
No, thank you. I am. It's going to take a little talk.
Okay. All right, so let's move on. We're going to have a final round of questions tailored to each candidate. But we do have one general question left, and let's get to that right now and start with Raphael. Most all Americans appreciate having a strong military to protect them in times of crisis, but as the U.S. budget faces record deficit, and you all know that, what position do you take on the downsizing of the American military to help the budget? Raphael, begin with you.
Ronald Reagan used to use this term often, peace through strength. There is no economy, there is no America, there is no environment, there are no jobs without having a strong military. The number one job of the government is to protect us. How could we be turning our military back to pre-World War II levels? Yesterday, I met a young female Marine at Conejo Valley Days. She's a sergeant. Asked me that same question that you just asked right now. And while we were engaged in conversation, she started tearing up. She started tearing up even though all her ratings have been outstanding. Yet, come July, she's being pushed out of the Marine Corps because they're downsizing. For those that don't know the size of the Marine Corps, it's a tiny organization, and they're going to make it even tinier. Once we do that, you see what happens around the world, around us right now. The proof is in the pudding. You have Putin trying to reignite the Soviet Union. If we downsize our military any further, all we're going to do is continue to run into problems. It's absolutely incorrect and wrong and immoral that we're going down that road right
now. We need to preserve a strong military, absolutely. I had the opportunity to serve twice Afghanistan and I saw multiple borders, first of all, we had the opportunity to go in and liberate that nation. And young women and girls are now able to go to school and to work in Afghanistan when they hadn't for 30 years prior to that. And I, as an intelligence officer, got to watch multiple borders of Afghanistan where countries in that vicinity who hate us for our liberties, for our freedoms, for the things that we value as Americans, would do anything that they could to take that from us, to deprive us of those liberties and those freedoms. And so absolutely, you know, the fact that we've rolled back our military to the point of World War I levels, the fact that we're not supporting our veterans, the fact that we haven't stepped up to support our allies in Europe and the Middle East is terrible. I've had the opportunity to travel and talk to these folks, and I'll tell you right now that our allies, they no longer trust us, and our enemies no longer fear us. And until we can re-engage and create the kind of military that can defend us